Hi, and welcome to NCTV's series on homelessness, Where Do We Go From Here? I'm Al Dover. I'm a retired Nevada County Superior Court judge, and I also get to be your host today for this particular segment of the series on homelessness. My guests today are Judge Candace Heidelberger of the Nevada County Superior Court and Judge Linda Sloven of the Nevada County Superior Court. And Judge Heidelberger handles the Nevada County Drug Court, amongst other assignments, and Judge Sloven, the Nevada County Mental Health Court, amongst other assignments. We're going to talk a little bit about how these courts intersect with the homeless and their issues. So let's find out. Your Honors, in traditional courts, people are arrested for crimes, they're prosecuted sometimes, and then when they are, those prosecutions can end up with an acquittal or a conviction, and if a conviction or a plea of guilty, then these people are sentenced generally to probation or jail or prison. That's kind of a traditional model of how we think in terms of a court's process. Judge Sloven, maybe you can tell me what's different about your court, sometimes called an alternative court or a collaborative court. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. In mental health court, after someone, let's say, enters a plea of guilty or no contest to a charge, whereas in traditional court, they might get a sentence of 3 years probation, 180 days in jail, and fines and fees. If they come into mental health court, an example of an incentive to come into mental health court might be they get 3 years probation. Their jail time of 180 days is suspended as long as they participate in and successfully complete mental health court. Mental health court is a program that lasts at least 1 year, and during that 1 year, the defendant would be required to come to mental health court every 2 weeks for a period of about 8 months, and then once a month during the last 4 months, and they would see me. I would check in with them, see how they're doing, check in with the treatment team that treats that person. So a person in mental health court gets a treatment plan. They get mental health services, usually sponsored by Behavioral Health of Nevada County or Turning Point of Nevada County. They will go to individual therapy sessions there. They will go to group therapy sessions. They will see a doctor who prescribes medication. They'll be required to take the medication. They will be sometimes they're required to do volunteer work, community service, things like that. And then again, they check in with me on a regular basis so that I keep tabs on them. It's thought that that interaction with the judge, even if it's as short as 2 minutes every other week, that facilitates progress in mental health court. And if they successfully complete mental health court, they won't do the 180 days in jail.
And so you mentioned you have a team.
We do.
So this is a team approach. Is that true also in drug court?
Absolutely. With adult drug court, we have, of course, Nevada, the district attorney, the public defender, probation, but we also have law enforcement involved. We have the behavioral health department involved, the treatment providers, core and common goals. So everyone meets together in a collaborative way, does an assessment, determines what the appropriate treatment plan is going to be for the individual, to make sure that all of their criminogenic needs are being met in order to hopefully have them have a successful outcome.
And is your program also last a certain period of time?
Well, in adult drug court, we only take individuals who are what we call high risk, high needs. They're people who are prison bound, and so they generally have a prison commit, sometimes as low as 3 years, sometimes as high as 16 years, that's hanging over their head, that is suspended while they participate in the program. And as a general rule, we're going to expect them to be in the program at least 18 months of active treatment, with then some phases going after that where they're on supervised probation to make sure that they follow through.
So let's talk about how this intersects with homelessness. How would it intersect with homelessness in terms of the mental health court and that population that you serve?
Well, I can tell you that a great percentage of the people that come into mental health court come in homeless. They have been living on the streets for an extended period of time. And one of the wonderful things that mental health court does is it provides housing to them. And so I think that presently, out of approximately 12 people in mental health court, we might have one person who is homeless. He lives in his car. But as to the others, they either reside at Odyssey House, which is for, I think it's the severely mentally ill, and behavioral health hires some kind of an independent contractor to oversee the Odyssey House. So some of our mental health court participants are at Odyssey House, and others live at supported independent living environments throughout the community. There are a number of houses that Behavioral Health and Turning Point operate, where, for example, there's one in Penn Valley where I think we have 6 mental health court participants all living in one home, all participating in the chores of the household. And it's my understanding that there are approximately 22 beds in Nevada County for which HUD gives the funding for these beds in homes. And so some of these supported independent living environments have people paid for by HUD, and those HUD grants for the 22 beds must go to people who have been chronically homeless. And chronic homelessness is, I think, defined by federal standards as having been homeless for at least 365 days out of the last 3 years. So I'd say it's a really big benefit to those people who are in mental health court who have lived on the streets, who now are living with a roof over their head, which facilitates their ability to take their medication, because another benefit of mental health court is there's outreach done by Turning Point. They will deliver medication to people. And so if somebody has a house, they're there to receive the medication, whereas if they're on the street, they don't know where they're going to be that night, and there's no ability to do that medication outreach.
So this sounds like what in social services is referred to as wraparound services.
Exactly.
There's a lot of attendant care.
Exactly.
That's terrific.
Even transportation for people in mental health court when they need to get to doctor's appointments, to therapy sessions, if they can't get there because they don't drive, there will be a personal services coordinator who comes, picks them up, and takes them to their meetings.
Fabulous. How about the intersection with your population in drug court, Judge Heidelberger?
It's probably not as much as it is in the mental health court. However, in some ways, we've almost created homelessness because they're in jail for a long period of time. And so when they come out, they don't have a place to go. In adult drug court, they're typically going to go into a residential drug treatment program first for a period of time, and then they often will transition into a T house after that until such time as they can find their own safe housing. One of the issues that we have, it isn't really directly related to homelessness, but with respect to these individuals, they've been convicted of felonies, and so when they do get their drug situation somewhat under control and they're in transitional housing and they're looking for work and looking for housing, their felony convictions interfere with their ability to find housing because no one wants to rent to someone who has a felony conviction.
Right.
So in a way, that homeless situation is a little bit different than what we're talking about, but it has some of the same impacts. If we can't get housing for these individuals, what's going to happen? They're going to relapse.
Let me just interrupt you to ask you, do we have to be dealing with felons for drug court? Do we have to be dealing with felons for mental health court? Can't we be dealing with that lesser level of crime called misdemeanors or infractions in any court, in any alternative court?
Not in adult drug court, because
Right.
that is strictly limited to prison-bound individuals, and we have grant money and there's certain restrictions on what we do. However, we have attempted to create what we call a community court, and again, this was with the collaboration of the public defender, the district attorney, law enforcement, particularly Grass Valley Police Department, Nevada City Police Department, and Hospitality House and Sierra Roots, where we were trying to deal with some of these low-level, as Judge Sloven said, the 647Fs, the trespasses.
647F is drunk in public.
Drunk in public. We were trying to deal with some of these low-level offenses, many of the individuals being homeless, by using sort of the Hospitality House and Sierra Roots as case managers and identifying those individuals, getting them into our community court where we would try to, I guess, provide them with options where they could sign up on a case plan to do certain things, and in exchange for doing those things, they would either get no jail time or some fines would be suspended. So we did attempt that. It has not been robust. We're trying to get it kind of back up and running again, but that is one way we can try to deal with some of the low-level offenses.
And I would say in mental health court, we take all levels of crimes. Most of the people in mental health court have been convicted of misdemeanors. We do have some felony convictions as well, and we have different incentives for the different levels of crimes. For example, if somebody who's been convicted of a felony successfully completes mental health court, the incentive that was offered to them in the beginning was that their crime will be reduced to misdemeanor after successful completion of mental health court, and that's a really good benefit for somebody who wants to go out into the community without a felony conviction on their record.
Huge. And just in terms of the rest of the community, people are always concerned about their safety, and courts are concerned about safety in general. Do we have any sense of how these courts either make the community safer or what the impact is vis-a-vis the community at large?
Well, I was doing some reading recently. An article got forwarded to all of the judges, and it was about a study that was done at the Florida, was it the Florida? Oh my goodness, I think the Florida not Florida, someplace else, an Institute of Technology, it might have been Florida. They did a study last year about the effectiveness of mental health courts, and what they concluded in this study that was published, I think, in June of 2017 in a psychology journal, was that even 3 years after graduating from mental health court, the benefits of mental health court are seen in a tremendously reduced recidivism rate. So I think that it's pretty clear, at least based on this one study, that it is very successful. And they also found in the study that for those people who did commit crimes after graduating from mental health court, they were of a significantly reduced severity, the type of crime. And the study concluded that for people who commit crimes because of mental illness, jail isn't going to stop them from committing crimes in the future. Treatment is.
Right. And how about, do you know any statistics along that line for drug court?
Nationally, there are statistics, many studies that have been done. You can actually get them on the National Association of Drug Court Professionals website.
Good.
I don't have them at my fingertips, but as a general rule, there's a clear cost saving. I think they say for every $1 spent, there's at least a $3.50 or something like that savings just in the criminal justice system. But I think the bigger saving is the community, what you were mentioning with families that are not torn apart, and so we save money on foster care and of course the cost to children who are sent to foster home when their parents go to prison.
Sure.
There's the benefit of these individuals, they live here, they're going to come back here, so if they go to prison untreated, the statistics are very high that they're going to reoffend very soon after they come back. Whereas with drug court, the statistics show that for 2 to 3 years out, there's a very low recidivism rate, and even as much as 14 years out, it remains very low. So the benefit to the community is the increased safety by the reduction in crime, as well as lives saved by individuals who are now employed and living in the community and being productive members of society. So I think there's a big savings, both monetarily and for the families.
Well, it sounds like, pardon me, certainly both. It sounds both cost effective, and there's so much to be said just for breaking that cycle of arrest, conviction, sentence, arrest, conviction, sentence, because both your courts are really designed to do just that by bringing these wraparound services to this group, including the homeless. And so it sounds like it's effective for them, for their families, for the community. So that sounds pretty special.
I would say for myself as a judge, mental health court and DUI court, they're the best parts of my job because I see so much success.
Yeah.
Would you say the same thing for drug court?
I would. It's really, it's amazing to see individuals who had basically given up and society was ready to throw them away, who make that turnaround, and with the the help of the collaborative team and their own determination, because it takes a lot of hard work, they are now people that you could call a friend, and you see them out in public and they're just doing great. Yeah, it's very rewarding to see that.
Yeah, that's
They
gotta
don't
be
all
fabulous.
make it. I mean, I
Sure.
will say they don't all make it, and when they don't, they go to prison. But when they do make it, it's just amazing.
I can think of one participant in mental health court from a couple of years ago. When he came in, there was no thought that he was going to succeed. He was high on meth most of the time when he came to court. He had severe mental illness. Something happened halfway through the year. He turned around. He got his drug problem under control, and he graduated from mental health court. And after he graduated, he would regularly come back to mental health court just to check in and say hello and give a few words of encouragement to the other people in mental health court. It was a true success story.
That is
Very,
fabulous.
very inspirational.
And I'm sure you've seen several too that are inspirational.
Very many. In fact, we now have a very active alumni where our drug court, we're up to about 19 or 20 people in drug court, and we have individuals who graduated who come back at every drug court, or at least at some of them, and sit in as part of the sort of the collaborative team, not during the staffing, but in court. And so they still participate. They provide support for the individuals who are going through it now. So it's really great to see them giving back to community.
Fabulous. Thank you, Judge Heidelberger. Thank you, Judge Sloven. We're going to take a break at this point. Please stay with us for the next segment.
The moment I felt his humanity, it didn't matter anymore how he looked, the color of his hair, the shape of his body. I felt such compassion and connection, and it was a real lesson for me. And actually, when we got off the bus, he was asking for my help with carrying something. And at that point, I felt really open, and I just came and helped him, and our hands touched, so I could really feel like body to body. And then he went, he didn't even say goodbye, or because he was all into his own world. And I was so grateful that I had this experience where I could see my own fear was imagination.
This series is made possible by the generous donation of Stifel Financial and viewers like you. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Welcome back to Where Do We Go From Here? And now that we're post-break, I wanted to ask the judges both, what special challenges do the homeless face in dealing even with an alternative court like mental health court or drug court? What special challenges do you think they face that you notice in your dealings with the homeless that are in your court? Judge Sloven?
Well, I'd like to answer that a little bit differently, if that's okay.
You're the judge, any way you want.
All right. What I see in terms of the effect of homelessness on the people in the court system mainly has to do with people not in the alternative court. I see people who are charged with quality of life crimes like shoplifting and camping in town because they don't have a place to stay. And those are the two that come to mind. I can think of one person, one defendant, who told me after a charge of shoplifting that he was sorry, but he was going to be doing this again because he had no money and he had no other way to eat. He was charged with taking something from one of the drugstores in the area, something to eat and something to drink, and that it was going to continue. So I think that is a major challenge for people who are homeless, is how do they eat, how do they get around, and where are they going to sleep that night? Another problem that I see repeatedly with people who are homeless is they fail to show up in court when they are supposed to. And so you might have one defendant who has failed to come to 5 court appearances. And when I ask the person about it, they'll say, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, I don't have a place to live. I'm homeless. Last time I was in court, somebody wrote down when I was supposed to be in court next time, but I misplaced it because I don't have a place to stay." And so that makes sense to me. It doesn't excuse it, but it's a problem to keep track of things when you have no home, and to get to court when you have no car. I think a lot of those problems are addressed for the people in mental health court. As I said, they have transportation, they're given places to live.
So we send, notices to people oftentimes, come to court. Where do you send that if someone's homeless? And how do they get there if they don't have transportation? So those types of issues. So now it compounds the problem because now you have failures to appear in court, a more serious problem. You can have multiple charges, more serious problems. And of course, if a person intends to steal when they enter a building, you can have not just shoplifting, you can have burglary charges. You can take that, I'm hungry, I just needed something to eat, and turn it into a felony. So those are serious consequences you're talking about.
It is serious, and it's understandable, but it doesn't help the business owner, that this person who doesn't have anything to eat comes into their business and takes something without paying for it.
Sure. And for you, Judge Heidelberger?
The same, I think, as Judge Sloven, and I addressed it earlier with adult drug court. We're really dealing with not the issue of homelessness coming in, but the issue of can they get housing afterward. Because I do the felony calendar, I don't see as many of those types of issues in my court. However, as I indicated, we did start a community court. And we're hoping to get that to be more robust. And those are the exact cases that the community court is trying to deal with, those quality of life crimes where the incentive is let's get you hooked up to a case plan where you're agreeing to do certain things, whatever it is, the substance abuse treatment, going to your doctor and getting your medical issues taken care of, going to mental health and taking care of those issues. So they're really agreeing to follow a service plan in exchange for potentially dismissing those cases, or if they've already been convicted, getting those fines reduced. So that is kind of our community court where in my courtroom we're dealing with those quality of life issues to help them through Sierra Roots and Hospitality House and case management to get services so that they will no longer be homeless.
Those quality of life offenses, we talked about 647Fs and any low-level offense. I know there was a huge story years ago out of New York City that when they really started managing those lower level, what they called quality of life offenses, and managed them in much of the way you're just discussing now, it also prevented far more serious crime and also brought about a huge reduction in the crime rate generally in New York City. It was a huge success to implement that. So when you say, it's not as robust as you'd like it to be, and you have some plans for it. So maybe that's one of those, where do we go from here? How do we, what are the impediments to making it robust?
I could say we could start with the budget.
Yes.
Because there is absolutely no funding for us to have that court. So right now we staff it with basically a volunteer, and there's no court reporter, and we're trying not to impact the court's budget because there's no money to fund it. All the district attorney, the public defender, law enforcement, they're all just volunteering their time to come to the court to do that. So funding to be able to actually have a court where it's more robust and we're being able to track those cases better would be a starting point.
And I would say, kind of on a separate issue, that in terms of where we go from here, I think that the state of Utah has been on the forefront of addressing homelessness and has significantly reduced their homeless population, I think from a national average of 22% chronic homeless to 6% in Utah.
Wow.
And their focus since about 2005, I think, has been on providing housing. And they've found that it costs less to provide housing than it does to get care for homeless people, to transport them to the hospital, to provide medical services at the hospital, the law enforcement, the court system. All of those expenses are dwarfed or dwarf if they have housing.
Right.
So I don't know how we raise money in our community to provide housing for the homeless.
Right.
I think it's worthy of putting some heads together to figure that out, because I think if we can find a way to provide housing, we're going to solve a lot of our problems.
Well, for the folks that are watching this, if they keep watching this series, they're going to be talking to people who we ask those questions about, and who hopefully can provide some where do we go from here answers in their realm. But what you're saying in some measure Judge Heidelberger, is that the sheriff's department, the police departments, social service departments, when people volunteer their time, we're talking about making a commitment to a program, and it's not like there's extra pay for it or they're getting some benefit. They're really purely volunteering their time. And so that is big. That's a big ask of a lot of people that already feel like they're working more than a full-time job. And so in terms of a budget, we're talking not just about a court's budget, we're talking about a budget for each of those departments that would have to somehow play into a community court?
Yes, and I think the biggest issue would probably be a case manager, because to really have a court like that be successful, you're going to have a case manager that is taking those cases, monitoring them, keeping track of their compliance if they're doing community service or if they're following their treatment plan, and then being able to report that to the court. So it would be a collaborative court with a case manager, whoever that would be. Right now it's been volunteer case management by the hospitality house.
I was going to say by who? Who would it be, a court person, a hospitality house person?
I think it would be something that a collaborative group would have to discuss to see.
Decide.
And it could be the hospitality house, it could be probation, although these low-level cases are not generally going to be on probation. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it would be through the court.
Right.
It would be one of the other organizations that would be doing that.
Okay, so a case manager, though, that would be a big function, because that would be a person that would coordinate with everyone else, all these other attendant services.
Yes.
And would that be similar for mental health court, that whole community court aspect? Or do you have your own case manager?
Well,
How's that
we
work?
have a variety of people on the mental health court team. We have the public defender, the district attorney, we have probation, then we have a representative from Turning Point and a representative from behavioral health. We have personal service coordinators that do the transportation. So we're pretty staffed up in terms of care managers.
Great. So the kind of where do we go from here, kind of maybe that community court and that better budget, just some more folks to help, and then in your end of the equation, housing.
Right.
Because when you're talking about the situation we're dealing with now, so many times we're dealing about a trip to the emergency room, from the emergency room to jail, from jail if they fit into one of your programs, but if not, the normal traditional court process, and then that cycle doesn't necessarily get broken, as it does so much more in the alternative or collaborative court system.
Right, and keep in mind our collaborative courts are small by comparison to the number of criminal cases there are, because they just don't fit into the criteria of those two courts.
That's right. And a lot of people don't know that it's not just, well, I have a mental health problem, so I get to go to mental health court. I have a drug problem or a substance abuse problem, I get to go to drug court. There's a criteria, is there not, that gets people into both these courts and that eliminates them from being in those courts?
There are some criteria, that's true, but additionally you have to have a defendant who's motivated, because it's a big commitment to come to mental health court. It requires that you go to all these meetings during the week, you come to court every 2 weeks. There's a lot that the person has to do. So for some people, it might be easier and more expedient to do their 180 days in jail and be done with it.
Or especially, how about if they're just in denial? How about if they're in a critical mental health period where they're really not able to track or make decisions? Or in a drug court context where they haven't really come down from whatever brought them into the criminal justice system. Sometimes it's nice to give people a little dry out period or whatever it might be, and then let them, oftentimes in collaboration with their lawyer, make a decision about what's best for them.
That's right.
Because you say it is a big commitment.
That's right. And those changes do happen. I mean, it can take a few months between the time somebody is arraigned on a new case and the time they decide that they want to join mental health court, for example. They're required to come and observe mental health court a handful of times so that they see if they think they can do this or not.
Right.
And then the team evaluates them as well to see, do we think we can help this person?
Yeah, interesting. I'm sure you've both seen changes right before your eyes of people that are incarcerated maybe spend a few weeks actually getting fed, actually sleeping, actually not worrying about getting fed or sleeping, and you see right before your eyes, in just a matter of sometimes a week or two, an entirely different person shows up there in court.
Very true.
Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on this segment of Where Do We Go From Here? And I hope if you're interested, you'll watch this show, which I believe airs on Monday at 7 p.m. And also, if you're so moved, please feel free to donate to NCTV. You can go to their website to see how to do that. Thank you.